narrative.
We were in the middle of yet another argument, one of those pointless fights that seem to happen more and more often lately. It started over something trivial, like me asking if she wanted to spend time together that evening. I thought I was being considerate, offering to set aside work and distractions to focus on us. But instead of appreciation, I got a sharp, dismissive response. Her tone was cold, almost rehearsed. "I don't owe you intimacy," she said, arms crossed and eyes locked on me like she was daring me to challenge her words. At first, I thought I misheard her. I blinked, trying to process what had just come out of her mouth. "What?" I asked, half laughing, half nervous. "What does that even mean?" She didn't flinch. "It means exactly what it sounds like," she snapped. "I'm tired of you acting like it's some kind of obligation. Just because we're married doesn't mean I owe you anything." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. We'd been married for 8 years. 8 years of sacrifices, late nights, and working overtime to give us the life we had. And now she was telling me point blank that my feelings and needs didn't matter. That the foundation of our marriage, trust, intimacy, partnership, was apparently optional. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her how much that hurt, how rejected I felt. But the words wouldn't come out. Instead, I just stood there, staring at her like a stranger had suddenly appeared in my wife's body. The fight didn't last much longer. She walked out of the room, leaving me standing there with my thoughts racing. I tried to brush it off, convince myself she was just stressed or having a bad day. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't the first time she'd made me feel like I didn't matter. It was just the first time she'd said it so clearly. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to figure out where things had gone wrong. Had I missed the signs? Had I done something to push her away? Or had I been fooling myself all along thinking we were still a team? By morning, my frustration had turned into something else: resolve. If she didn't owe me intimacy, then maybe I didn't owe her the endless sacrifices I'd been making to keep our marriage afloat. I wasn't going to let myself feel like a beggar in my own relationship anymore. I didn't say anything to her right away. Instead, I started paying attention, really paying attention, to how we interacted, how she treated me, and how little she seemed to care about the effort I put into our life together. And the more I noticed, the more convinced I became that something had to change. But what that change would look like, I still wasn't sure. All I knew was that I wasn't going to let her words define my worth. Not anymore. The days after that conversation felt different. Something shifted inside me. I started seeing our marriage through a different lens, not as a partnership, but as a constant balancing act, where I was always the one giving more to keep things steady. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I remembered the long nights I spent working overtime so we could afford the down payment on our house. Back then, she told me how proud she was, how lucky she felt to have someone who cared so much about their future. I held on to those words like fuel, pushing myself harder because I believed I was doing it for us. But now, looking back, I couldn't help but feel like I'd been tricked. Like my sacrifices had been quietly erased the moment they stopped being convenient for her. It wasn't just the money either. It was the small, everyday things. The times I canceled plans with friends because she said she needed me at home. The weekends I spent fixing things around the house or running errands to make her life easier. Even the nights I gave up sleep because she wanted to vent about work and I didn't want her to feel alone. And intimacy? That wasn't just about sex for me. It was about feeling connected, valued, knowing that the effort I put in wasn't taken for granted. But apparently that was too much to ask. I started keeping track of the imbalance, not on paper but in my head. I'd take note of every time she dismissed me or brushed off something I cared about. Like the night I came home excited about a new project at work and she barely looked up from her phone. Or the time I made her favorite dinner after a stressful week and she just said, "Thanks," before walking away. I don't think she even noticed the way I was withdrawing. Maybe that was the worst part. How easy it was for her to overlook me when I stopped trying so hard. One night I sat in my car outside the house, staring at the dark windows and wondering if it was even worth walking inside. It was such a stupid thought. I mean, it was my home too, but I felt like a guest there, like someone whose presence barely registered. I thought about what she'd said, how she didn't owe me intimacy, and for the first time, I let myself ask the question I'd been avoiding. What did she owe me? Respect, appreciation, partnership? Or was that just something I had imagined we had? I started thinking about the early days of our relationship, back when we couldn't keep our hands off each other and talked about everything. I missed that version of us, but the more I tried to picture it, the more it felt like a different lifetime. That night, I didn't go inside right away. I sat there in the car, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror, trying to recognize the man looking back at me. I didn't see the guy who had been full of dreams and plans when we got married. I saw someone tired, someone who'd spent years pouring into a relationship that had stopped pouring anything back. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't angry because of what she said. I was angry because deep down, I knew she was right. She didn't owe me intimacy, but if that was true, then I didn't owe her the version of myself that had been bending over backward to keep us together. That night, as I stepped on through the door, I felt different. Not angry, not sad, just done. Done trying to fix something that she didn't even seem to notice was broken. And as much as that realization hurt, it also gave me a strange sense of clarity. If she didn't owe me intimacy, then maybe I didn't owe her the version of myself that had spent years bending, adjusting, and sacrificing to make things work. The shift started small. I stopped asking her how her day was, not out of spite, but because I realized I didn't actually care to hear the same rehearsed complaints about coworkers or deadlines. For once, I wanted to see what would happen if I let the conversation die instead of always being the one to keep it going. At first, I don't think she even noticed. She was so used to me filling the silence that my withdrawal just blended into the background. I'd sit in the living room, scrolling through my phone or flipping through TV channels, and she'd barely look up. But as the days passed, I saw it starting to sink in. She'd throw out little comments. "You've been quiet lately," or "Everything okay?" But I'd just shrug and brush them off. I wasn't going to give her an opening to turn it back on me, to make me explain myself while she sat there acting like nothing she'd said had started this in the first place. I could tell it was getting under her skin. She started poking at me more, criticizing the way I folded laundry, complaining that I didn't refill the gas tank, even accusing me of being distracted during conversations we weren't actually having. But instead of rising to it, I let her words roll off me. I wasn't playing that game anymore. And then something strange happened. She started trying. At first it was subtle, bringing me a coffee when I was working late, suggesting we watch a movie together like we used to. But instead of jumping at the scraps of attention, I let her efforts hang in the air, unacknowledged. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I needed to see if it was real or just another way to smooth things over without actually addressing the problem. The tension grew thicker by the day. She'd reach out, and I'd pull back just enough to keep her guessing. And the more she tried to regain control, the more obvious it became that she didn't know what to do when I stopped being the one to fix everything. One night she asked me directly, "Are you mad at me?" Her voice was quieter than usual, like she was afraid of the answer. I looked at her and said the one thing I'd been holding back since the night of that fight. "I'm just done trying harder than you." I saw the words hit her like a slap. She opened her mouth to respond, but for once, nothing came out. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the upper hand. Not because I'd won some argument, but because I'd finally stopped apologizing for wanting more than she was willing to give. The morning after I told her I was done trying harder than she was, the tension in the house was impossible to ignore. She was quieter than usual, but not in the way I was used to. This wasn't the cold, dismissive silence she had mastered over the years. This felt different. It felt unsettled, like she was waiting for me to crack and explain myself. But I didn't. I went about my routine as if nothing had changed, made coffee, checked emails, and left for work without so much as a glance in her direction. And that's when it started. The text messages began around noon. "We need to talk," I ignored it. "Seriously, we can't just act like this isn't happening." I left that one unread. By the time I got home, she was already there, pacing the living room like a caged animal. I could tell she'd been rehearsing whatever speech she was about to give me, but I didn't let her start. "What do you want?" I asked, dropping my keys on the counter. Her eyes narrowed. What do I want? Are you kidding me? You're the one acting like a stranger in our own house. I want to know what's going on with you. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was unbelievable. What's going on with me? Are you serious right now? I'm just following your lead, sweetheart. You made it pretty clear what this marriage is and what it isn't the night you said you didn't owe me intimacy. Her face flushed red, and for a second I thought she was going to deny she said it. But she didn't. Instead, she turned defensive. And I don't. I'm allowed to set boundaries. And if you can't handle that, then maybe that's your problem, not mine. I felt the anger bubbling up, but I swallowed it. I wasn't going to let this turn into another shouting match where nothing got resolved. You're right, I said, my voice calm. You don't owe me intimacy. But let me ask you this. Do I owe you commitment? Do I owe you loyalty? Do I owe you anything that goes beyond basic civility? Her eyes widened, and for the first time I saw something crack in her expression. Fear. She didn't answer, so I kept going. Because if we're playing by those rules, then maybe I don't owe you date nights, emotional support, or even coming home at the end of the day. Maybe I don't owe you putting us first when you've already made it clear that we're not a priority to you. That's when she snapped. That's not fair. You're twisting this into something it's not. I just wanted space. I never said I didn't care about you. Then show it, I shot back. Because right now, all I see is someone who wants the benefits of a marriage without having to put in the work. The room went silent. She looked like she wanted to say something, but the words didn't come. I waited, giving her the chance to fight for us, to prove me wrong, but she didn't. Instead, she sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I don't know how we got here, she whispered. And honestly, neither did I. All I knew was that the woman sitting across from me didn't feel like the same person I married. And maybe I didn't feel like the same man anymore either. But instead of sitting down and comforting her like I used to, I turned and walked away. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't going to be the one to clean up the mess. I didn't go back into the living room that night. I let her sit there on the couch, alone with her thoughts, while I locked myself in the guest room, my new space. It wasn't a dramatic statement or a ploy to get her attention. It was just me drawing the line. I needed distance, even if it was just a thin wall between us. Over the next few days, we barely spoke. We moved through the house like strangers, avoiding each other except for the occasional brush past in the kitchen or hallway. She tried a few times to restart the conversation, but I shut it down every time. I wasn't ready to talk, not yet. Instead, I spent that time figuring out what I wanted. I thought about whether I could keep living this way, trapped in a marriage that felt more like a contract than a relationship. I thought about the years I had poured into us and whether any of it still mattered. But most of all, I thought about myself, about who I had become in this marriage and who I wanted to be moving forward. It didn't take long for me to realize that I didn't like the person I had turned into. I was tired of giving more than I got, tired of chasing affection that should have come naturally, tired of feeling like I was the only one fighting for something that felt broken beyond repair. And that's when I made my decision. One evening, after another day of silence, I walked into the living room and found her sitting there with her phone in her hands, pretending not to notice me. But I could tell by the way her shoulders tensed that she was waiting for me to finally say something. I didn't waste time dancing around it. I can't do this anymore, I said. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. What? This, I repeated, motioning between us. I can't keep pretending like we're fine when we're not. I can't keep giving and giving while you act like it's enough just to be here. She started to speak, but I cut her off. I'm not angry anymore, I told her. I'm not even hurt. I'm just done. I don't know if that means we separate, if it means counseling, or if it means something else entirely. But I know I can't keep living like this. For the first time in weeks, she looked genuinely scared. So what? You're leaving? I shrugged. Maybe not, but I think we need to spend some time apart to figure that out. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a split second I almost caved. I almost wrapped my arms around her and told her we'd figure it out like we always did. But then I remembered her words, that she didn't owe me intimacy, and the fire that had been keeping me going reignited. "This isn't just about you," I said, my voice firm. "You made it clear what you don't owe me. Now I'm making it clear what I won't keep giving without something in return." I grabbed a bag I had already packed and walked toward the door. She didn't try to stop me. She just sat there, crying quietly, while I stepped outside and shut the door behind me. And as I drove away, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: relief. Not because it was over, but because, for the first time, it finally felt like I had a choice. I didn't check my phone for hours after I left. I knew she'd text or call eventually, but I wasn't ready to face whatever words she had waiting for me. I needed time to think, to breathe without the weight of her expectations or the constant pull of obligation pressing down on me. I stayed at a cheap hotel that night, staring at the ceiling for hours and replaying everything that had led up to this moment. I kept asking myself the same questions over and over. Had I made the right decision? Was this the end of my marriage? Or was this just the reset we needed to fix what had broken? By morning, I still didn't have answers. But I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't ready to go back. The first few days apart felt strange, almost like I was living someone else's life. I had dinner alone, sat in silence without a TV buzzing in the background, and went to bed without hearing her footsteps down the hall. At first it was liberating, but then the loneliness started creeping in. Not because I missed her, but because I missed the idea of what we used to be. She called me on the third night. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hey," she said, her voice small and hesitant. "Hey." Neither of us spoke for a long time after that. I could hear her breathing, shaky and uneven, and I knew she'd been crying. But I wasn't ready to let my guard down just because she sounded vulnerable. "I don't know what to do," she finally said. Her words hit me harder than I expected. This was the same woman who had always seemed so sure of herself, so unwilling to admit fault. Hearing her admit that she didn't have the answers threw me off balance. "I don't either," I admitted, "but I know I can't keep living like we were." "Neither can I." That was the first time we agreed on something in months, and for a moment, it felt like progress. But then reality set in, and the conversation stalled again. Over the next few weeks, we started talking more, but the distance between us remained. She wanted me to come home, to at least try counseling before we gave up entirely, and a part of me wanted that too. But another part of me couldn't forget how we got here in the first place. I couldn't forget how it felt to be told that my needs didn't matter, that intimacy was something she could withhold without consequence. I couldn't forget the nights I felt invisible in my own home, or the resentment that had built up inside me for years. So I didn't rush back. Instead, I set boundaries. Real ones this time. If we were going to try again, it had to be different. I wasn't going to keep chasing her affection or begging for scraps of attention. She needed to show me that she was willing to put in the work, that she actually cared about fixing what we'd broken. And for a while, it seemed like she was trying. She went to counseling sessions alone when I wasn't ready to join her. She sent me long texts about how she was reflecting on the things she'd said and done. She even stopped blaming me for how distant I'd become. But as much as I wanted to believe her, something still felt off. Maybe it was the fact that it took me walking out for her to start trying. Or maybe it was the realization that I didn't trust her not to slip back into old habits once the dust settled. In the end, the decision wasn't as dramatic as I thought it would be. There was no explosive argument or tearful goodbye. It was just a quiet understanding that we had grown too far apart to ever find our way back. I filed for separation a month later. She didn't fight it, and even though it hurt to close that chapter of my life, I walked away knowing that I had finally chosen myself, something I hadn't done in years. Whether it was the right choice or not, I guess only time will tell. But for now, all I know is this: I don't owe anyone more than they're willing to give in return. Not